Good evening, good afternoon. Thank you for being with us. It's Jonathan Hoenig with you once again for the Daily Objective with a great guest today, Seth Levine from the Integrating Investor. And we're going to talk about a topic that brings out the passion. Actually, we're not going to talk about politics, which probably will be quite enjoyable. We'll talk about something else, certainly more dear to my heart, and that is money. And it's a topic in particular that brings out the passion, oftentimes the vitriol, I think in many ways the intelligence and the innovation of people more than anything else, and that is Bitcoin. And if you've been hearing about Bitcoin, this is probably one of the reasons why I'm going to share a screen here. You're taking a look at what the price action has been in Bitcoin just over the last couple of years. It is up thousands and thousands and thousands of percent, gaining a lot of really mainstream adoption now. We're seeing major companies put hundreds of millions of dollars into Bitcoin. Now, a lot of people have said to me, oh, well, Jonathan, you're a libertarian. Okay, I'm not, but they say, you're a libertarian. You must love Bitcoin. There's even a political element of this. And here to unpack it all is Seth Levine, once again, from the Integrating Investor. Seth's written quite a bit, and Seth's been published on Zero Hedge and almost everywhere else. His blog is right here. It's once again, the Integrating Investor. This is his recent article about Bitcoin. And Seth, thank you for being here and being with us to help unpack it all.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I can't think of a better place than here than to talk about Bitcoin. And I really, and why I think this is such a great venue is because I've been around the Bitcoin hoop for a while. I've been following it, since early 2011, 2012. And I was initially drawn to it because of that sort of political aspect for it, right? Like free money, right? And I don't mean free as in handout, but unregulated money and banking. Yeah. Exactly. Right. And over the years, as I followed it, what I've come to realize is Bitcoin is a lot of things to a lot of people, but for most people, above all, it's an abstraction, right? It's not actually like a concrete thing. It's a very abstract concept. And at least as I've broken it down more and more over the years and concretized it, I've found my views on Bitcoin changing. So maybe just going let's go through real quickly. I mean, when you bring up Bitcoin, like the first thing that pops into a lot of people's heads is, oh, it's internet money, or it's the future of money, or it's digital gold, or it's some kind of like frictionless payment platform, or it's this uncorrelated portfolio investment asset, right? So it has all these things, but when you actually look at what Bitcoin is, it's really just a database. So big yawn, right? Like all those grand abstractions, you just boil it all down. It's a database. Now it's very innovative in that it's decentralized and kind of maintained by the Bitcoin network using a series of incentives. But that's about it, right? And if you look at sort of the initial plan for Bitcoin, it was as a payment platform, right? So forget about everything that we want to talk about that what Bitcoin is. I just think of it as a decentralized database, and and that was primarily thought of to be a payment platform.
Meaning that there's a blockchain technology here that is separate from what we think of as being Bitcoin as an investment. There's Correct, something right. here as a technology that is legitimate, as you're talking about this database, that is separate, right. Totally separate of the value of the Bitcoin or the Ether or the Ripple or whatever the other Bitcoin prices or crypto prices that there are. There is a technology here.
There is a technology here, yes, and it definitely is innovative. And maybe we'll just kind of put that aside for a second. But when I think about kind of the bull case for Bitcoin, right, from an investment perspective, and before I go any further, I should mention these are my personal opinions, of course. Usual disclaimers here: this is not investment advice. Do your own work. Not my employer perspective or anything like that. Sorry. Anyway, so when I think about Bitcoin and its use case, so like, why would I want to buy Bitcoin, right? Why should Bitcoin's price going up? I see it. I can boil down all the abstractions into two real cases, right? There's a use case, which is sort of the database technology, and there's kind of the investment case, right? So when I think about the use case, right, and this goes back to the quote, I just see very little evidence that anyone is using Bitcoin really for anything from a database perspective, right? There's I think there's real promise from a technology perspective in terms of using it as maybe a next gen financial services, platform, right? Um, but otherwise, you just see that blockchain technology kind of branching off by other features. So, there's a whole concept.
Let me share that quote. You mentioned a quote. I mean, Miss Rand has a quote, and I'll quote her: "Material objects, as such, have neither value nor disvalue. They acquire value significance only in regard to a living being, particularly in regard to serving or hindering man's goals." That's from Philosophy Who Needs It, and that you shared in your article as well, kind of asking, well, what really is the value of Bitcoin?
Right. And we see, so what are we using it for? Like, is anyone actually using Bitcoin? And this is, I think, a pretty interesting chart here that is in the article, but I've tried to update it this morning. Let's look at the transactions, right? Is Bitcoin actually being used? And what you'll notice is on the blue line here is the transactions. And you can see early on, the Bitcoin transactions were picking up. And you also saw the Bitcoin price, which is in red, kind of follow that. But very recently, we've seen, from 2018 on, if you look at kind of the area on the right of the chart, if you can see my mouse, the transaction volume has stalled. And really what you just see is the price, though, however, has completely rocketed up. So I just, so I think it's pretty interesting. And I think a reason why you see the transaction pretty low is that it actually makes for a pretty bad payment platform, right? The Bitcoin network can only verify anywhere from 3 to 7 transactions per second. And compare that to like Visa, right? Visa does 15,000 times that per second, right? They do over 65,000 transactions. So as a payment platform, it's actually pretty weak.
Is that some of the reason we're getting some questions? Marialine saying, she needs Bitcoin for dummies. Where does the value come from? Daniel asks, does it come from production? But we're talking, this is, in Rand talks, we'll share some of Rand's quotes about money and value. But, when we're talking about something like gold as having value, it has to be produced out of the ground. It has to, all the effort that goes into it. And Bitcoin to be produced or to be mined, just for those who don't know, it also takes effort. In effect, it takes computer effort. So right now there's banks of computers all over the world, especially in Iceland and literally in cold places with cheap energy, doing nothing but doing computer problems to get to mine, so-called mine Bitcoin.
Right. And it's interesting, like why is that important? And I have some pretty strong views that are pretty unique in this too, which I've written on in the past, and we can get to that, link to that, or just reach out to me and I'll send it to you. But that's because money is just a veil, right? Money is really just an abstraction for value already produced. So that is why. So that's why I think it's important. This is why fiat currency, I think, fails in the 150 times that it's been tried before, is because there is no it's not tied to actual production. And this is also why I think gold was successful, because in order to, that an ounce of gold actually represented sort of some kind of production that took place in order to produce the gold, such that it represents actual, it corresponds to reality. An actual production that either, that a human actually made.
Let me, stop sharing your screen for just a moment, if you don't mind.
There you go.
I'll share some of Miss Rand's quotes on this. She says, exactly as you're summarizing, money cannot function as money, as a medium of exchange, unless it is backed by actual unconsumed goods. And that which gold represents. Here's another one I like, that money is also a tool of saving. Which permits delayed consumption and buys time for future production. To fulfill this requirement, money has to be some material commodity which is imperishable, rare, homogeneous, easily stored, not subject to wide fluctuations of value. And certainly, Bitcoin might at some point achieve that. And people I don't see it on the chat, but people say, oh, well, you're just a hater. You're haters on Bitcoin. You just don't believe in it, Bitcoin. I mean, I own a Bitcoin, probably, I don't know, unlike probably you or the Lord Emperor. I actually, maybe in the clubhouse afterwards, I'll tell my experience. I'll say that how I was positioned in 2013, you've heard this story, Seth. Like, if I had held the Bitcoins I had in 2013, I would be a millionaire from Bitcoin. But I broke up with a girl and thus only have one left. And I'll tell that story in Clubhouse. So how's that for a tease?
It's always a woman.
I'm not a hater, but like you, I look at the barrier to entry to anything else besides Bitcoin that has all the ultimately the values to me as a consumer that Bitcoin provides, and say, really, what is the barrier to entry here that makes this worth anything?
Yeah, and I think that's a great segue, because I also own Bitcoin. But the question is, well, like, how can I own Bitcoin? Am I a hypocrite, right? And this brings me to the investment case for Bitcoin. Right now, I think what's making Bitcoin go bananas is you have a lot of institutions that are coming in to buy it, right? And why they're buying it, I think, is a little nebulous, and I think needs to be unpacked onto its own. But when I think about any investment, right, and I've written about this,
and you do this for a living.
And I do this for a living, right? And this is something that took me years of my own introspection to come to this framework. I really see investing as being broken down into two categories of investments, right? And Jonathan, I'm sure you'll be able to sympathize and opine. Something either has to have value, or it has to what I call is momentum, right? And what do I mean by that? Momentum just means the price trend. There's a trend there, and the trend is going to persist for whatever reason, right? The value I would correspond to kind of the use case, right? Why would this maybe change in the future? Because it's going to be used so much more. So with Bitcoin, I think it has very little present use case, right? No one's really using it now, but maybe there's some kind of future use case, right? So I see it very much like a tech stock, or like a venture capitalist investment, like high possibility of payoff, but kind of a low probability of payoff. However, from a momentum perspective, right, from a trend perspective, this is where I'm more focused on it in the present, right? Because there are all these institutions buying Bitcoin. There are people like MicroStrategy raising bonds to buy Bitcoin. There's Elon Musk, who's taking this corporate treasury and buying Bitcoin. So there is money that is flowing into Bitcoin and purchasing Bitcoin, and that, I think, is that's a valid investment case right there. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about Bitcoin right now, and kind of looking at the trend. And I'll make no recommendation on whether the trend is good or not. I'll leave that to Jonathan. He sure is. That's kind of his specialty there. But I do think that breaking down Bitcoin, like in this epistemological way, separating out the abstractions and also separating out the investment cases, actually makes it possible to actually make an investment in Bitcoin one way or the other.
Yeah, I think there gets to be this kind of public pressure that everyone's doing it, everyone's making money. Actually, I keep this old Newsweek magazine around. So this is a Newsweek magazine from 1999, and it's titled "The Wine of '99." Everyone's getting rich but me. And this was the feeling back in 1999. I mean, I remember it very vividly. Everyone's getting rich at the time, it was tech stocks. Everyone's getting rich but me. Now, ultimately, the internet, and I'll just, this is my own experience. Certainly this isn't objectivism, but that a lot of that technology in 1999, Seth, did succeed. The internet was the hot thing. The technology did succeed, but a lot of the companies didn't. And that's right. Ultimately, my perspective on this is that there's going to be a lot of great advancement. I mean, there is something about this technology, as you said, that is something new that maybe Visa ultimately will adopt. And so there is something there. Now, how much of your savings and portfolio do you really want to put into it? I mean, it has to be an individual decision, but that sense of, oh, I have to get involved just because it's going up, that to me reminds me very much of 1999.
Yeah, look, I'll share my screen here right now. I mean, this is a Google trend, Google trend of Bitcoin searches, right? If very clearly in December 2017, that really, the last kind of Bitcoin bubble, if you will, we saw a giant spike up in interest right there. Again, you saw it at the end of 2019, but also right now too. You could see that interest in Bitcoin on Google is spiking.
Let me play a quick devil's advocate. You asked what's the what's the value, and one of the values is that it allows for illicit transactions. And a lot has been made of that people, for example, in Venezuela or in China or in Cuba, places that money is highly controlled, or where the value of the money, I don't know, forgive me if you can hear the sirens here. I am in Chicago. Basically saying that it's a way for them to hold on to the purchasing power of their assets or hide those transactions. So is there a value in Bitcoin as a medium of illicit exchange that could give it ultimately a worth here?
Yeah, I mean, look, whether or not you want to call it illicit or not, I mean, as a payment platform, it certainly has some virtues. That is, in fact, that is the initial intent of it, is to be a payment platform to get around the Byzantine regulatory environment that just makes it very expensive and inefficient to send money, especially across borders, but even within borders. So there definitely is value there. But I go back to the transactions. You just don't see a lot of transactions taking place.
Well, so Elon Musk is now saying, well, they might accept Bitcoin for payment on a Tesla. But as a consumer, I'd think, well, is it going to be cheaper for me to pay in Bitcoin? Because if not, what's ultimately the value for me to pay in Bitcoin rather than just paying in dollars?
Exactly. And I think that goes back to, I'll share my screen here. That goes back to what is money, right? It's a very important what is money, right? So if you can see my screen here, there was a big headline here that a football player here in the U.S. is going to get half his contract, $13 million in Bitcoin, right? He's going to get paid in Bitcoin. Bitcoin was actually going to be money for a change, right? It wasn't just going to be something that you translate.
When did he agreed to that? Months ago, though, right?
Months ago. However, if you go down and dig into the details, right, look at what I've highlighted here. He is not getting paid in Bitcoin. What the Panthers are doing, the Carolina Panthers, his employer, is they're paying him in US dollars, and then they're going to go and just swap it out at spot price, right? So basically,
he's going to get the appreciation that would have gotten in Bitcoin.
It's no different than if you and I just took money right now and went out and just bought Bitcoin at the spot price, right? Using on, at any of the exchange. And by similar logic, right, he's getting paid in food, in cars, in clothing, right? In anything else that he's taking his US dollars for and buying. So he's buying Bitcoin just like he would buy any other consumer good or buying a home or buying a car, right? It's still not being used as a payment, as a payment platform. It's not being used as money, and by money I mean a unit of account of exchange. Now, obviously,
and saving.
It's not, yeah. But right now, it's really just, in my view, like right now, it's just being hoarded, right? And that doesn't mean it won't change in the future, but that's just kind of how I see it now.
Seth is, and you can. Share your screen. You continue to share it if you want. Or Eric is suggesting that Ethereum. I don't know. It sounds like something that they stick up your tuchus.
Ethereum, yes.
Ethereum. Yeah. Sorry, Ethereum. Another crypto coin has more use value than Bitcoin at the present time. Ethereum allows for on-chain contracts. Okay, maybe that's. Mary Aline asks, could Bitcoin be used for tax avoidance?
I mean, I am no Bitcoin expert. I think it depends. So, for example, I use my Bitcoin is stored on on one of the biggest exchanges, right? It's not. I don't own a ton of Bitcoin. That's should be a disclaimer too. I am long Bitcoin. I'm also long Ethereum. Very small amounts. Not going to change my life. Anyway, but so be it. I hold it at the exchange, whether or not that's smart or not. That's a different debate. But I know they have tax forms, so they are taking. I have tax forms available with them, so I think it's getting harder to avoid taxes. I think governments are aware of that. I think also now as the price has risen and profits are bigger, there's more of a honeypot for them to kind of go after.
Right, because there's still a when I got involved in Bitcoin, I'm just saying it was physical coins that we had in our possession, and that you went to these meetups and traded. So that was a way of actually, now it's the same. So in a weird way, and this is certainly not tax avoidance, I'm not advising on tax avoidance, but buying and selling gold, if you go sell gold at a coin shop, they're not going to give you a tax form. It's so there's no transaction of that. But if you, as you said, sell Bitcoin on Coinbase, there's a taxable event there.
Possibly, and I'm not a tax attorney, and I'm sure they're around that too, right? You could buy it on an exchange, maybe that's not regulated, right? I mean, there's a lot of ways to buy Bitcoin, because that is one of its virtues. It is very easy to transfer, if you kind of have, but you do need some kind of technical acumen, which I definitely don't, even if it's a slight amount.
Well, I appreciate your perspective at the Integrating Investor. I really encourage everyone to definitely check it out. There's talk about misnomers about objectivists. There's this idea of like, oh, every objectivist just loves gold and Bitcoin. That's what they invest in. But the more investors who are objectivists you talk to, you realize they each have their own really interesting application of these ideas and ultimately professional practice. So I've really learned a lot from the Integrating Investor, and I encourage all of the Ayn Rand Center UK viewers and listeners to definitely check it out. There's very few people applying objectivist ideas to the investment world, so you do it in a really interesting way, even on, as you said, a topic like Bitcoin, which ultimately is a very big abstract idea.
Great. Yeah. I mean, the feeling is mutual. I learned a lot from you, Jonathan. I've learned a lot from the Ayn Rand Center in the UK. And that is kind of the nature of, to me, it just shows the nature of humanity, right? We're all trading here, right? We're coming up with ideas, and we're trading with other people, and hopefully forming new
not omnipotent, Dr. Peikoff, I know from his lectures, I always enjoy hearing when he reminds us that none of us are God. There is no God, certainly in the investment world. So the fact that, we're not here crowing, oh, we told you to buy Bitcoin, now it's 1,000% higher. We're not omnipotent, and we're all students of objectivism, and certainly students of the market. So I want to remind all of our viewers and listeners that in 35 minutes, right here on this channel, Don Watkins and James Valiant are going to be discussing Ayn Rand's essay, What is Capitalism? I mean, they are two brilliant minds. I will be listening. Seth, I know you'll be listening as well, so don't miss that for James Valiant and Don Watkins. And we're going to be coming up in just a minute or two on Clubhouse. So that's where the juicy discussion starts, right? So join us on Clubhouse afterwards, and you can find an invite in the YouTube chat section. And that's a great way to find it. So Seth, thank you for joining us today and for sharing your perspective. And if you have any final closing thoughts, or you want to kick it over to Clubhouse?
Yeah, no, I would encourage everyone, just kind of, there's my website up there, integratinginvestor.com. You can find my Bitcoin piece there. I also have some pretty interesting thoughts on money. There's a 2019 kind of article in there called To Fight the Fed or Not. It's To Fight the Fed or Not. That links to a report where I kind of laid out some thoughts on money, which I think are unique, and again, kind of uniquely objectivism, where or objectivist kind of inspired in that way. You could also you fill out the contact form, if you can't find it or have any questions, and you can, I'll respond to you there. You can also hit me up on Twitter. I'm at Seth Levine 2 on Twitter. And that's kind of the best way to get in touch with me.
Awesome. And Ella, I want to fit this in really briefly. Ella asks, if Tesla has Bitcoin as an asset and the value increases, maybe it even has to pay asset-related tax. I mean, absolutely, it becomes a asset on their books, and if they certainly sell it and take a gain, they pay a capital gain like everyone else.
Maybe I'll just leave this as a teaser then. As a guy who's analyzed companies for, I don't know, coming up on 20, almost 20 years or so, as a corporate CFO, I can think of no bigger nightmare than owning Bitcoin on my balance sheet.
All right. Thank you for that perspective. Thank you all for joining us. And we'll see you on Bitcoin, or we'll see you on Clubhouse soon, but we'll see you here on the Daily Objective tomorrow at the same time. Be well and best premises.